Seems to be running like a pretty well-oiled machine. On to the next one then.
On to the next one. Let's see. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second part of our Climate Hawks Vote candidate training, run for office training. My name is Morgan Goodwin, and I'm going to be talking about crafting your stump speech. And we're just getting situated here. If you haven't already, know that you can pull up the chat on the side of the YouTube. If you go to the YouTube link, and you can see the video as well as type in the chat. Hi, Ken. Good to see you. Good to see you in there in St. Louis. And with that, let's get started. So, as I said, my name is Morgan. Just take a moment to arrive, close Facebook, put down the phones. You're investing the time on this hopefully beautiful Sunday to be here and really take a step towards being a more effective and powerful leader. So just do it for yourself. Just be here fully. My name is Morgan Goodwin. I am the head coach at progressivecoaching.org. I'm the mayor of Truckee, California, and I've been a climate activist for, going on 10 years now. And I'm just going to stop the presentation a little bit and say, hi, this is me. Even though we are separated across the digital divide, my goal for the next hour is to connect with you as humans, as fellow climate change leaders. I'm hoping to learn something from you and hoping that you get something valuable out of this. So just wanted to say hi and put a human face on this. I wish I was able to do both the video and the presentation. So objectives for this session, what are we trying to do? We are going to teach you how to become an excellent orator, an excellent public speaker. By the end of this hour, you are going to be able to deliver speech with the best of Abe Lincoln or Barack Obama. And part of doing that is learning the public narrative structure and technique. This is a particular way of crafting a stump speech, or really any kind of speech, that just we know is super effective. It's tested, it's tried and true. And we're going to link that to the process and even the definition of what is a political platform and how do we go about building it? How do we assemble that structure? So if you are not interested in learning to be a better speaker, learning some powerful structures and techniques for public speaking, and building your political platform, you are in the wrong place, and you can bow out gracefully. If this is what you're in for, get ready, because we will dive right in. Turns out a lot of people have used this quote. This was first told to be one of my political mentors, Mike McGinn, who served a term as the mayor of Seattle and actually and then lost re-election in 2013. Just announced he's running again. Just an amazing human being. And he says, people don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. And when I was campaigning for city council, for town council in Truckee in 2014, I found this to be so true. And it's just one of those quirks. It's one of those like, oh, that's how politics works. Words are important. Words mean something. Unlike our current president, who doesn't seem to think so, I would prefer a world in which the words we say matters. But at the end of the day, they're really just there to serve a purpose, which is to create a connection with a person or an audience, and to create an impression, and ultimately to create a feeling that people remember for years and years and years. Years later, you can ask someone who met a politician, what was he like? And he says, oh, he was amazing, he was kind, he was generous, he asked about me, he had a good impression. Or, the opposite, which we don't want, is he ignored me, he or she was mean to me, didn't get it, et cetera, et cetera. So public speaking is really important, but remember, at the end of the day, it's just a tool to connect with people and to create a connection, create a relationship. So why do we use public narrative? Public narrative, like I said, is a narrative structure that helps us to craft a speech in such a way as to be effective, at connecting with people and ultimately getting them to take action. And a lot of this is really leading up to how do we get people to take action. So why this structure? There's a number of, there's plenty of public speaking structures out there. Why this structure? This structure is based on the notion that people learn with their heads and with their hearts. And this is a tool to connect the two together. And so, and one without the other doesn't have a lot of value, doesn't have a lot of power. Public narrative develops the why in the equation. Why do I care? Why is this important? Both why do I as the candidate care, and how can I try and create that caring, create that investment in the person I'm talking to or the audience. And public narrative, as you guessed, narrative means story. And so the public narrative structure is really a storytelling structure. And this is important because we're social people. We relate to people with stories. We think of the world in terms of stories, and we attempt to fit all of the information that we receive into stories. And so an effective public speaker is an effective storyteller, someone who can engage that storytelling, social, very human part of who we are, and again, be effective in translating that into action. There is a lot of great examples. There are a lot of great examples of using the public narrative structure. Marshall Gans, a researcher at Harvard University, has spent a lot of time walking alongside Cesar Chavez and is organizing in California with the farm workers. and then went back to Harvard and really kind of distilled a lot of the what worked into this form. And so the public narrative structure, if you remember watching Barack Obama's Democratic National Convention speech in 2004, it was really the first time that he kind of arrived on the national scene. He was just a young senator at the time. But he gave a speech that was brilliantly effective, and it is a textbook example of the public narrative structure I'm about to teach you. So go back and watch it. I watch this probably once every year or two just to keep it fresh, partly because he's a beautiful human being, especially before the gray hair, but partly because it's just such a learning, it's such an opportunity to learn from one of the greats on how to do this. And there's many other great examples. So it's a very simple structure. It comes in 3 parts, and the order matters. That structure goes, it's the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. Self, us, now. And the story of self, and all of these achieve different purposes. So we're gonna break this down. We're gonna get into all of these in a lot more detail. But the story of self, briefly, is why I care. It's a story about you, and it's a story about you that has a specific purpose, which is communicating to the audience why I care about X, and also what I care about. The story of us is a story of the community or the group. It's a story of who we are, which is both a chance to define that group and also to invite people into that group. And those 2 things are important. We'll get to that in a second. And then it's the story of now. And the story of now brings the urgency, and it also brings the course of action, the plan moving forward, the ask. If we all do this, then we'll be better off than if we don't all take this action. And throughout all of these, and especially in the story of self, but really throughout all these, again, if you remember nothing else, remember that what we're doing is storytelling. Humans are natural storytellers and story listeners. And if all you do is tell a good story, people will remember you and have a good impression of you. And so what makes a good story? This is foundational to all of this stuff. And then we'll get into the self, us, and now in more detail. There's 3 elements of a good story. There's a challenge, there's a choice, and there's an outcome. And so I'll just give you a quick example. One from my life recently that really has nothing to do with climate change activism, and that's all right. I like to ski a lot. I have been skiing all my life. I like to ski, stuff that is difficult and challenging. And I went out with a couple friends a few weeks ago after a big storm, and we wanted to ski a particularly steep run that I'd never skied before. I'd looked at it for years, and it was finally the conditions were right. But part of the conditions for being right in skiing is that they can also be very dangerous. Avalanches can be caused by skiers and bury you or drop you off a cliff, which was definitely the kind of terrain we were in. And the guys I was with, were fairly experienced. We got onto the slope, and there was definitely a little more snow than we expected. And when we tested it a little bit more snow slid than we thought. And that's the choice. That's the choice. The objective is, let's go ski this run. And we reach that point, and we discover that there's some real danger here. This is a risky endeavor. And if I was talking to a group of school kids or beginner backcountry skiers, I would probably not tell this story, or I'd make up a different one where I took the choice to do the right thing and do the safe thing. But I didn't. We assessed the risk. It was a known risk, and we proceeded very cautiously. But we went. We took those first few turns. It didn't slide, and we skied through the rest of the run, and it was phenomenal. Like, it was just amazing. Seriously, one of the best runs of skiing in my life. So think about, so that's that story. And let's just take a look at what I did there. Right? Set up a challenge, set up a challenging situation, a kind of risky one, kind of paint that picture. And I present the choice that I made. I, as an individual, made a choice. And now that you know that choice, and in being kind of part of this story, you know something about me and about my values. You know that I'm not someone who's always going to take the safest course of action. That's a value that I have that I think says something about me, right? It's how you would know me. It's how you would kind of use that to evaluate other actions that I might propose, other things that might come up. You kind of know this value about me, and you know it because of a specific setup and a specific outcome, and you know maybe something about why I would make that choice, because the outcome was worth it. The story would be just as good, if not better, if I told you a challenge where I made the choice and something bad happened, right? And that outcome is how you deal with adversity, how you deal with that kind of challenge. These are some of the elements of a good story, and this is a skill that I'm constantly seeking to improve in my work as an activist and as a leader. I just told you a very brief version of the story of self. Let's go through what some of those elements are, and what we mean when we say the story of self. The story of self is a chance to get to know you and why you are called to serve. And in that storytelling, just like that ski run, that risky ski run, it reveals something important, which is your values. And I would argue that that's the most important thing we can communicate. Values are how we kind of decide where we fit into our politics, right? If people think that Trump's values are identify with their own, they're going to give him a lot of leeway for all the crazy stuff that he says. And conversely, if they kind of decide that somebody shares a few values that are just not their own, it's no number of facts will overcome that. And so by revealing your values, you're seeking to let people know you, and hopefully know you in an expansive and big enough tent kind of way, that you're making an effective connection with more people than your political opponent. And we do that, and we're placing ourselves in a relationship. So we're telling a story of self that people can identify with, right? So the story I just told would not be an effective story if I was speaking to an audience outside of a mountain ski town, right? Because there would not be much of a relationship between me and the audience in that moment. In the case of, whereas if I am speaking to people who know something about mountain skiing, that places me in very close relationship to these people, because it's a situation that they can identify with, it's a choice that they can identify with, and they can kind of place themselves in relationship to my values and what I decided. The story of self it's not revealing your deepest, darkest secrets. It's not all of you. It's not, and please, please, please don't make this mistake. You are not talking about, I was born in this town, and then I spent 5 years in this town, and then I went to this school, and this teacher was really important to me, and I learned something. No. Is a story, a challenge, choice, and outcome that allows the reader to know something important about you, and ideally something important about why you care. And I'm gonna follow up with my bad example of the ski story a little bit later with a good example. So that's the story of self. That's the basic structure for how we communicate that. And so I would like all of you who are watching, even though we can't say hi to each other with our mouths, we can say hi to each other with our fingers. And I would love for you, just with a couple sentences at most, see if you can give me 3 sentences that gives me a challenge, a choice and an outcome that you experienced. And just do the first one that comes to mind. It's okay if it's not the best one. It's okay if it's not the if it's not even one that's related to your campaign that you might be running. Just in the chat, let me see what you got. Let me see how well I'm doing here in communicating this. I'm with a few pistachios. Super unprofessional. While we're working on that, I'm going to keep moving. We're going to take a look at the story of us. The story of us is the second part of our public narrative. The story of us is an opportunity for us to define the group. And when we do that, we set the stage for collective action. You know, a bunch of individuals can, become more or less of a group by the words and by what's used in the public narrative. So when we define the group, we unite people. We create that common bond. We're actually building the notion of a community or group. We do that by by communicating and establishing shared values. And this is such a fun part of this for me, because it's an area that I find we have a lot of leeway as leaders, as public speakers. So a group, and I want to talk about two kinds of groups briefly. I want to talk about kind of an organizing group, a campaign team, a project team, and then there's also the more of the public, more of the sort of community group. When we define the group, let's start with the campaign team. When we define a team of people and we unite people, and build this notion of the group by shared values, we're doing two things. We're asserting that this is a group, and these are some of the values of the group, and we're inviting people to be part of it. So let's say the group is the campaign team, and we want to give a pep talk to a group of supporters who are about to go out and canvass. I'm going to say, thank you all for coming. I might, let's always use a little story of, public narrative structure. When I started this campaign, I didn't think that, we'd have the support that we needed, and, but my friends said, you should do it anyway. And so I launched the campaign, right? There's the choice. And I started organizing, and just the most amazing people turned up, right? So that's the outcome, but it's also transitioning into the story of us. Well, who turned up, you might say? Well, we have, and here's where you get to define the group. We have this group of brilliant people who really get how interconnected the climate change fight is with our local issues of air pollution, of access to good food and clean drinking water. Like, the people that make up this team, they know that. They know that deep down in their core, that even though this stuff might be complicated, that even though the solutions to our struggle might be difficult, the people, you all in the room, know that this is the most important fight that we can be part of, and that we are going to fight. So I'm just going to pause there. And if you want to throw into the chat, what are some of the values that I just shared, that I just used to describe this group of people? And notice that as I'm describing this group, I'm praising them, right? Because gratitude and flattery is never, there's a time and a place. It's helpful, sort of a lubrication. I'm praising their intelligence. I'm praising their commitment, and thanking them for that. And I'm also implicitly in that, I'm offering them an invitation of how they can deepen their relationship with that group. I'm saying that the people who are part of this group get how interconnected these issues are. The people who are part of this group are committed to the long haul. The people who are part of this group are, just investing so much of their time in this fundamental change. And what that's doing is that's kind of extending a hand. It's extending an invitation to everyone there to say, yes, how can I deepen my engagement with this group? That's how I can I can think of myself as part of involved in the longer fight. I can think of myself as having a deeper understanding of the connections between the various parts of the climate justice movement. And when I extend that hand, I'm also extending a challenge, and I'm saying, hey, if we want to win, if we want to be stronger, if we want to do more of this, go work on that. Go learn. Go make yourself a more effective activist, and doing so in an inviting way. I'm not saying you have to go do this. I'm not saying that it's necessary or required even. I'm just saying that the invitation is there, and that if you accept that invitation, you are investing your time and yourself in this group to build the group and build this story of us into more and more of a story. That's so powerful. That doing that well is the difference between growing an organization and growing power week on week versus being one of those kinds of organizations that's always wondering, how do we get more people? How come people don't come back? Where are all the people? Now, there's other things about that, and about that kind of growth and recruitment that focus more on the individual connections and more on the numbers and more on the kind of mechanisms. But telling a powerful story of us is the deep connection. It's the deep invitation for all of the people in the room to join you. And we can turn this to the community and turn this nationally a little bit too. And I'll just touch on that briefly. But think about how, how do I want to say this? Well, let's take it to the highest level. The story of us works whether we're talking about a campaign team and how we build a campaign team. It also works about when we're talking about, say, a presidential campaign and the national character. Our presidential campaigns actually are a practice of telling a story of us, of what it means to be an American. And this is one of the things that Barack Obama was so incredible at. Really all these parts he was excellent at. But Barack Obama's story of what it means to be an American, of the values that Americans share, right? Hard work, integrity. If you work hard, you'll get a fair shot, right? Everyone has that same fair deal. That this country is the kind of country that can overcome adversity and overcome challenges. Those are some of the elements of the story of us that just come to me really, really quickly. And so the story of us is a powerful tool. It's a effective tool, and it's one that you will iterate on over and over again. But understanding what some of the important parts are and what some of the elements are will allow you to really make this your own. And making it your own, being an authentic sort of deliverer of the story of us is so powerful. It's one of the ways that people, it's one of the things people point to when they say that that person is really authentic. That person is a real person. We can sit down and connect with this person because he gets us. not only he gets us, but he's giving us value in the things that he says. These two, so the story of self and the story of us, do you think these are about the head or the heart? If you had to guess, would you say that these are more of a head kind of story or more of a heart kind of story? And if you're quick, you can jump into the chat. But the story of self and the story of us, it's really about the heart. It's really about the emotions and the connection that we feel as one person to another. Great job. Great job. Strong answers. Story of now is about the head. The story of now is about making it more kind of intellectual, fact-based. It's more informative. It's more of like the news story that gives you the latest update in what's happening, and it often comes down to what's the challenge and what's the plan. How do we go? What's the threat, or what's the new development? Why is this week different than last week? This week is the week before voter registration ends, and so this week this is our last chance to bump our registration numbers up. And we know that if we register 500 more voters in this precinct, and then get the turnout election day, we know that gets us to our win number. And so that's kind of the up to the moment action, or state of play, as well as you notice I transitioned just so smoothly to what's the action. Well, let's go register the voters. What's the plan? And remember that challenge, choice, outcome? Bring it in here too, right? This is a story. This is a story of now that involves a challenge. There's 1 week left of voter registration. And there's a choice. We can double down our efforts. We registered 200 voters last week and 200 voters the week before and 200 voters the week before. We have a choice. We can work twice as hard this week and hit that 500, or we face a riskier and rockier road to the general election on election day. That's our choice. What's the plan? We're gonna go out there and we're gonna start registering voters. We're not just gonna start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We're gonna start at noon. We're gonna work twice as many shifts, which means you need to, if every person here brings a friend to the next voter shift, then we can do that. So go out, bring a friend, see if you can get off work early, and we're gonna make this happen. It tells a story, and then it has the outcome, right? It says the challenge and the choice, and then the outcome is we know that gets us to our win number, right? The outcome is it sets us up for a strong election day. It tells that story of A to B to C to winning. And it contains the ask, as I've alluded to, bring a friend, start earlier. And so the story of now takes all that heart, all that energy, all that emotion, and when, as you do more public speaking, you'll learn to read the emotion in the room. But I encourage you to practice this kind of thing conversationally in one-on-one conversations. Draw people into the emotion and then say, yes, what you're feeling right now is important, and what we're going to do next is very specific and very clear, and clearly ties on to that. It's also our chance to demonstrate our leadership. One of the definitions I use of leadership is suggesting the action, or initiating the action that increases the power of a group of people. And so there's a lot of actions we can suggest that don't advance the power of a group of people, right? If we said, we need to hit 500 voter registrations this week, and so we're all going to go home and Facebook post about it. And if we all do that, we're going to win. It's like, well, let's think about that for a second. Is that gonna make us more powerful? Is that gonna actually get us the numbers that we need? Maybe you're in some crazy social universe where you have a huge amount of influence in your local area, and the people you've not asked. Sure, you could construct that situation, but I would offer that as an example of an an action that is not particularly strategic or leaderful. The story of now is when we get to demonstrate how strategic we are, what an effective leader we are. And it's by saying that I'm offering this action, I'm offering this strategy that we all take, and I'm going to kind of detail you, I'm going to bring you along and convince you that if we do A and then B and then C, we're going to win. And then going out and doing it and being right is what really clinches the deal. And I just want to, oh, I think I took that slide out. So I'll just share a little bit of a story here. For me, I live in a small town. I live in Truckee, California. Truckee's not the center of any political universe. It's not the center of any district really beyond the town. But I made a choice to live there because of but I live there because of the balance it offers me, because of the community it has, because it is home to me. And it really, on just a profound level, it speaks to me. The challenge that I want to share was election day. I got involved in the election late in 2016. I worked hard for 10 days, and ultimately we suffered a crushing defeat. And I said, God, living where I live, how can I be a more effective part of this political moment, of this very exciting time in our nation's history? I value this small town. I have these global kind of outreach and values. And the choice that I made was a choice to really invest in my coaching practice and really build a business and build a coaching practice to support progressive leaders in being more effective candidates for office. And when I started down that path and launched a webinar to train, at the beginning I thought I was going to train, I wanted to train 50 people, give them a kind of an introduction of what it might look like to run for office. And I worked and worked and worked, and that 50 people turned into 650 people who signed up for the webinar that I did in January. And so we as the community of activists, so now I'm switching to the story of us, we as the people who have become energized by this election, by this loss at the national level, we have so much potential. We have so much experience. Many of us have been involved in elections before, kind of tangentially. We've done some political work, and a lot of us have kind of checked out, myself included. There's more to life than running campaigns, and yet we have this potential right now to wake up, to get re-engaged, and to take on a greater leadership challenge than we might have otherwise. Just going to come back in here, say hi again. Make sure you remember that there's still a human here on the other side of the screen. And this group of people who is signing up for Our Revolution groups, who's coming to Indivisible meetings, who's coming to Democratic Party meetings, I think that we are aware of the uniqueness of our moment and aware of the responsibility and the challenge before us in a unique way, maybe more uniquely than any time since the Vietnam War protests and the peak of the civil rights movement. We're aware of that. We're informed about that history. We're interested in being effective, especially as we continue to network with each other. And because we're so networked, because we're so connected, we're uniquely positioned to launch a political revolution, a movement for a progressive platform across this country that has not been seen for generations. I would argue that the kind of organized political power that this group of people represents is unparalleled since maybe going back to the Civil War or some of the the political fights of that era. And that's our challenge. And that's what I switch into the story of now, is that that's what we have to do. We don't have a lot of time to get organized, to build the power, to step into leadership roles, to step into the work of developing our platforms and developing our narratives. And ultimately, we know what the path ahead looks like, and that path ahead looks like being realistic about the way that power in this country works, the way that power within the Democratic Party works, and with that realism, with our eyes wide open, stepping into leadership roles and stepping into change-making roles en masse, and force at a more coordinated and deeply held way than any other time in our history. That's our challenge, and that's what I'm asking you to do. So, pausing, right? Examples over. We're having fun drifting in and out of the content and where we are and how we win. See what I did there? I told a choice that I made, right, about leaning into the political moment after the election and changing my professional business to be more in line with my values. There's something you can know about me. There is us. There's some of my insights, some of what I've seen about the people who make up who's watching this, but also extends that group out to a larger group, right? It's an invitation to say, really, everyone who's feeling this, everyone who's in this moment, it is an invitation to be part of this very unique group and this very special group, right? There's the praise, the excitement. And then there's the news. There's the what's happening. What's my best take on what this moment means, and what's our best strategy forward, and how do we win? And that right there, it might be, you might be able to do it in a minute. It might be a 30-minute version, but that's the kind of story that you get to practice and you get to own. What's a political platform? Let's take a look at, really briefly, what is a platform and why is it even relevant? A political platform is a series of values and issues that you stand on. Literally, just use the platform metaphor. You're standing on these planks of the platform, and this is the language that we use. And those planks are often called issues, and they're interconnected, but they're distinct, right? So clean water is related to regulating the coal plant down or upriver, upwind, but they're unique, right? And that relationship means that we can talk about clean water, we can give a speech on clean water, and we can tie it into things, or we can go vice versa. We can give a speech on how we need to regulate coal plants and tie it into clean water. We kind of weave, or maybe nail, to keep the metaphor of this platform together. Switch back to screen sharing really briefly, because this slide is fun. And most fundamentally, the political platform is a series of things that can be each or kind of en masse brought into your public narrative. That why do I care? What's the moment that I'm speaking to? What am I asking you to care about? What am I asking you to take action on? Those are the planks of the platform. And so the platform exists as this set of issues and set of values that you stand for. And it's used in their public narrative artfully and creatively, depending on the audience that you're speaking to and depending on the moment. Develop the platform by listening and learning. Big ears, be willing to learn, be willing to say I don't know. Nobody starts off with a perfect platform, and no one starts off knowing everything they need to know. But you need to be discerning. You need to use your judgment in saying, that doesn't quite sound right. what I'm hearing, what this person is telling me, what this person is really eager to tell me, it doesn't quite fit. I don't have to say yes to every idea that a supporter has about what issues are important. The platform should be clear and draw a contrast between myself and my political opponents. It should be clear that I am pro-choice versus they're pro-life. It's a crystal clear example, right? But most of our issues aren't that clear, right? I stand for a walkable downtown where we don't rely on the automobile as much to get around, therefore creating less carbon emissions, right? That would be a contrast to an opponent who says that parking is a big issue and we need to build more parking downtown, right? Those are two emotional appeals. Those are drawing a contrast on an issue that's important, that's part of the platform. Has to be authentic. That authenticity is key, and I think more and more in today's world, people's bullshit detectors are getting better and better. They're so used to these kind of empty platitudes that if what you're saying you care about is not authentic to you, you're probably better off not talking about it. And there are issues that I don't talk about because it's just not an authentic, personal connection I have. And lastly, iterate. Like I said, nobody starts off with a platform they need from the beginning, and iterating over and over, improving it, taking that feedback, building in the things you learn along your way of your campaign is the art of politics. It's the art of continuing to learn and grow in the face of the campaign. The last thing I want to say about the platform, and we'll get into how you use it. Platform is, it's okay to omit things. And this goes back to the authenticity as well as the clearness and contrastingness. Your platform does not need to cover every issue, and nor should it. Famously, my parents said they went to my parents love to tell the story of going to a candidate's, house party in our little town. The candidate was swinging through. There was 20 people there who got to meet the candidate for, I think it was state assembly for the first time. And one of the people at the house party asked this candidate, they said, well, what's your stance on the Israel-Palestine issue? And, my dad commented, and rightly so, how does, as a state assembly member, how would your opinion on this have any kind of bearing on any kind of outcome? Now, there is a case to be made that it might, right? If you had a strong stance, say, and you thought that the state pension funds should divest from settlements in the West Bank, and that was an important and authentic part of your platform, and you really cared about it, great. That should absolutely be part of what you talk about and what you engage with voters on. But it is absolutely acceptable and, in fact, very wise to leave out many controversial issues that you don't have strong opinions on from your platform. It does not need to cover everything. Your platform is a set of things that you care about and you think are important to lead with and really offer your leadership on. And it can't be everything. So part of that discerning is what we need to do. So public narrative and your platform becomes, that's what you do day to day when you're campaigning, whether you're phone banking or talking in groups or meeting people at the grocery store. You're literally talking. You are telling your story, and you're telling your story in a way that is meant to connect with people, share your values, let them know you, offer them a state of play and how they can be a part of it. And you recruit people in the strangest places. But the key to doing that well is practice. So practice, practice, practice. Yes, we're going to iterate. Yes, we're going to keep evolving this over time. But sit down when you have the inspiration, when you're inspired, and write out the 1-minute version of your public narrative speech. Write out the 5-minute version. Write out the 20-minute version. You can write out a couple different versions for different issues. If there's a couple things at the heart of your campaign, write different versions that lead with one or the other. Maybe use a different story of self depending on which one you're leading to, and then you weave in the others as kind of secondary. You're gonna want a web version of this for your site, a radio version. Radio advertising is super effective, especially in local races. Editorial version, when you send in your, maybe an op-ed to your local paper, you want it to reflect and mirror and build on this public narrative that's central to your campaign. Many states, I would imagine all places, publish a voter information guide that has it's a chance for the candidate to publish in their own words why voters should vote for them. Think about how to bring your public narrative into that, 250 words or whatever that is. And I've said this time and time again, but iterate, iterate, iterate. Don't throw something out if it's not working, but rather see how it can be adjusted, modified, and improved. I mentioned a couple times in this, my work is supporting progressive activists and political leaders to be more effective, to win and build power in their communities. You can learn more about my work at progressivecoaching.org/ClimateHawks. I really appreciate your time today, and I would be happy to spend a couple minutes answering any questions. You can reach me at morgan.goodwin@gmail.com. And again, the website is progressivecoaching.org. I'm going to stop the video here, jump back to the human world of saying hi, and again, when we wrap up here, you'll be able to jump back to the plenary session and hear the closing comments. Jessica, I'm glad it was very helpful. Yeah, just type in the chat. What was so helpful? Love to hear a little snippet of what you enjoyed about this. But with that, I'll stay in the chat for a little bit, but I will close the video right now and say goodbye. Thanks all.